Have you ever noticed how quickly a crisis can erase tension? Have you ever noticed the room that's filled with division, and then all of a sudden something comes up that draws both groups of people in, and it's an instant solution? You see, sometimes crisis reveals to us what comfort keeps hidden. I was 9 years old when the planes hit. I remember my dad waking me up. I remember walking into the living room and my parents' eyes glued to the TVs. I remember being confused as to why maybe this was such a big deal. 9 years old. I remember watching the planes hit the tower. Again, confused. I remember the fear I felt from the adults I was surrounded with. I remember the conversations I had with my peers, still the same confused group of young kids. I remember a silent courtyard, the prayers from the teachers and school administrators. I remember the flag at half-mast as we mourned the lives of 3,000 innocent people. And I also remember the anger of the American people. You see, their crisis brings people together, as unfortunate as that may be, and as frustrating as it might feel. Like, why can't we just all get along? A crisis comes and all of a sudden we're united on something that we wouldn't otherwise be united on. You see, crisis renews connections we tend to ignore. Crisis puts us in a place where we start wondering, well, maybe I can get along with that person. But here's the truth. Here's the truth of the matter. We don't really care about the crisis until it directly affects us. We don't really care. You don't really care what's happening right now until it comes to your shores, until it lands at your feet, until it affects your daily lives, until it affects your family members and your marriages and your church and your world. You don't really care about the crisis. And truthfully, I don't really care about the crisis either. Truth is, we can watch comfortably from the sidelines until it reaches our shore. Then it's panic and scramble. And when we realize we cannot solve it on our own, when the world around us realizes they can't solve it on their own, each man goes to his own path. When we realize that the crisis is what brings us together, but we can't solve the crisis alone, then it becomes spiritual, it becomes something otherworldly and supernatural. See, this is what's happening in the book of Jonah. You got a crisis taking place. Jonah simply paid his fare and got on the boat. Right? You see, God has called Jonah. Jonah runs. God rolls a storm, and everyone is affected. I'm going to move this over. Apparently my slides didn't come out like they were supposed to either. Is that supposed to say 1, 2, 3, 4, but it doesn't. So, just so you know, not my fault. I put it on there when I started the slides, all right? The computer messed it up. But hopefully we'll be solving that problem soon too. So God calls, Jonah runs. God says, you're not getting out of this. Hurls a storm, and everybody's affected. In fact, when we come to the sailors, this is what they're doing. They're going to the lengths that they need to try to solve this problem that they're facing, this immediate crisis. Well, we're going to throw the cargo. What does Jonah do? Sleeping. He's praying to their God. What is Jonah doing? He's sleeping. The sailors think they're going to die. What is Jonah doing? He's sleeping. As if to have no concern for the people on the boat, yet the sailors are going to great lengths. It gets so bad, here comes the captain, the commander of the ship, the individual who controls everything that goes on. The ship's about to break up. And he goes down into the hole and he finds a man sleeping. Because what they're trying to do is rally some spiritual help here. You ever hear people say, well, thoughts and good vibes? Thoughts and good vibes. We're trying to rally some spiritual help. We're trying to rally some people together to see if we can make something happen. Look at his questions. How is it that you are sleeping? And then you know what's really ironic? Is the captain uses the same exact word that God uses when he calls Jonah to go to Nineveh, chapter 2. Rise. Rise. How is it that you are sleeping? Arise. Get up. Call on your God. Perhaps your God will be concerned that we will not perish. You see, every man in this culture was expected to believe in God. At one time, we had an American culture where everybody believed in God. I don't think we can say that that's true in our world today. Not everybody believes in God. Most people might be spiritual. Some people might attend church. But you see, the culture is different. When we contrast our this ancient culture with a modern culture, we can't say that the same idea is true. Not everybody believes in the Christian God today. Not everybody believes that Jesus died on the cross for our sins. Yet when crisis comes, there seems to be this spiritual awakening that happens to people in an act of desperation and fear that they won't conquer, so they come together to try to get something going. It says maybe perhaps your God will be concerned. My mind immediately goes to Jesus here. I think of Jesus on the boat and the crisis in the middle of the Sea of Galilee. Do you remember what the disciples said to Jesus? Do you not care that we are perishing? And Jesus gets up and he calms the winds of the sea, as if to parallel the story of Jonah amidst crisis. As if to show that it wasn't the people coming together that created the solution to the crisis, that they had come under unity under some God and petitioned him to get. No, it was God that decided it was going to be done before they ever said a word to him. It was God that decided it would happen. Each said to his mate, here's the next length they go to, as if what they had done was not enough. Let's get Jonah up. Let's all gather around in a circle. Let's start a prayer meeting and let's try to petition this God. But in their measure, they cast lots, which the best I can tell is like rolling dice. We're going to see what happens. Roll the dice. There is no real that I can understand and that I can reach of what exactly lots are, drawing straws, rolling dice. You think of in your mind what they're doing. We're going to figure out what is happening here. You see, when we can't figure out what the solution is on our own, we can't figure it out by means of changing something in the ship, pushing up boards, removing cargo, shifting our course of direction. See, we can't solve the problem in the natural storm by ourselves. That means it has to be something supernatural, which we have no connection to. So in order for us to entice and to entreat the supernatural world, we're going to cast lots. And we're going to really see. This is what amazes me. We're going to see whose calamity this is. We're going to see whose problem this is right now by rolling dice and drawing straws. We're going to see what's really going on here. But you know what I find even more interesting than that? Is that when the lot falls on Jonah, it reminds you not that God is standing above them and looking down, but as if God is standing in their midst going. You ever watch The Phantom Menace? Star Wars: The Phantom Menace? They make a bet on Skywalker when he's about to go on a pod race. And he says, if it lands on blue, I'll take the boy, but if it lands on red, we'll take his mother. And as he rolls the dice on the ground, he puts his hand out, to roll it where he wants to. So this is what I imagine is happening in the moment. You got a circle of men in the midst of a storm, maybe in the hall, maybe on the top deck where the wind is blowing and the sea is raging. And yet God is standing there with them, telling them, look, this is not your problem. This is not what you have done or how you have sinned. This is simply one of my prophets running away, abandoning what I have called him to do. You see, Jonah is going to take every measure that he can to avoid going on this call because he knows what he goes on is going to be certain death. They said to him, tell us now, this is verse 8, tell us now on whose account has this calamity struck us? Look at the questions. What is your occupation? Where do you come from? What is your country and from what people are you? See, they didn't know anything about him. When he got on the boat, paid the fare, they took his money, they set him in a spot, put him in a bunk, hung him up in a hammock, no problems. We're a professional crew. We can handle these storms. They happen. But this one's bad. Bad enough we're throwing our livelihood out of the hull of the ship. And there's a man who's not even worried about what's going on. In fact, I think he'd rather die. And then all of a sudden it's like, no, we need to come together and we need to petition God to try to get it going in the right place, to try to see if this God, whatever God it is, will calm the seas, will reduce the wind. And then when all else fails, now we know it's Jonah. See, your identity will tell us. This is what I think. Your identity will tell us what we're dealing with. If you tell me where you're from, what country you come from, who your people are, that'll tell me who we're dealing with. But hiding your identity, see here, Jonah is selectively honest. You ever been selectively honest with people? You tell them some things about yourself, but you don't tell them the full truth because he never admits that he's a prophet. In fact, to some degree, it seems like he's trying to fall in line with the rest of the people on that boat. He says, I'm a Hebrew. I fear the Lord, God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. See, he's selectively honest here about the mission that God has called him to accomplish. You see, the sailors understand the gravity of the situation. Why would you disobey a God who has specifically called you to do something? You see, your rejection of that call is the reason we're in this crisis in the first place. The sailors are simply victims of Jonah's sin. They haven't sinned, they haven't done anything wrong, but you know what the amazing part is of all this? And we're going to learn this next week. The sailors are the ones who convert because of Jonah's disobedience. See, even God can take a bad thing and turn it into something good. Even God can take a crisis and make believers. Even God can do something that's unexpected. He said, how could you do this? Then the men became extremely frightened and said to them, how could you do this? For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord. Why? Because at least he told them that. At least he told them, you know what? I'm fleeing the presence of the Lord. I'm fleeing the presence of Yahweh. That's not good, Jonah. See, while we might look at Jonah and see an angry, careless, dishonest, disobedient, rebellious prophet, we can also recognize that he's an imperfect human being with pride issues, just like us. Or we can sit here and point the finger and say, why don't you just listen? Can we honestly say any of us would have done anything different? Can we honestly sit here with humility and say, well, I won't listen to God who called me? Would you? Would you listen? If God called you to a place that meant certain death, would you listen? While Jonah's disobedience endangers a group of ambiguous believers, my mind immediately falls to Jesus. You see, the contrast is really cool. One man's disobedience to one man's obedience. One man's obedience endangers just a small number of people, while one man's obedience rescues the entirety of the world. Jesus provided an opportunity for us. He saves the big boat of humanity, not just a few, not just the selected, not just the predestined, not just the good and the faithful, but he provides an opportunity for all of us to stretching out his hand, saying, come, drawing us near to him. See, while the captain was asleep, while the captain was asking, and Jonah was rejecting, God was calling. You've probably heard this before, right? How many of us think that's true? How many of us understand that all of humanity is in the same boat? Whether we think so or not, whether we're economically upscale, politically diverse, religiously or theologically stout or sound, we're all in the same boat. This is the message Jonah's trying to point us to. If we're all in the same boat, then what does that mean? What does it mean for us as a church? What does it mean for us as individuals? What does it mean for us as a race, as a humanity? What does that mean? You see, because we got a lot of things to divide on. We got a lot of things to separate us, to look differently at the way the world is. But truthfully, at the end of the day, we're all in the same boat. We all live for a period of time. We all die. We're all going to face judgment. The question is, do you know that? Do you have the courage to step out and say that to someone else? See, we look at this from a crisis standpoint. We understand that shared need creates shared responsibility. If we look at this from an individual standpoint, we understand that shared need creates shared responsibility. If we look at this from a church perspective, we understand that shared need, what is our need? Each other, creates a shared responsibility. I have a responsibility to you, and you have a responsibility to me. Yet it seems like we're always running, moving, disappearing. See, we should understand that in the church, if one of us faces the storm, we all face it together. But then what do we need to do to operate? What do we need to do to truly become a family? What do we need to do to understand that, look, my brother's pain is not just my brother's pain. You know what? It's not a matter of, brother, I'll pray for you. Do we mourn with those who mourn? We weep with those who weep. We share in the struggles of people in the moment of their storm, their crisis. Or do we just, I hope it works out for me, like the rest of the culture tells us? We have a shared need. We have a shared responsibility, especially as a church. Outside this, we have amongst one another. We have a shared responsibility, each to their own. It's not someone's, not to give, but this concept is difficult for us to understand in many ways. So here's what we do. I've got just two things for you this week. And then I got a challenge I want to walk you through for the week. Okay? Two things. Number one, pay attention. If we're going to care for one another's needs, if we're going to share responsibility for what God is calling us to do, we need to pay attention. When you don't pay attention when you're driving, what happens? Exactly. You got it right. So if we can simply pay attention to what God is calling us to do, maybe there's a few filter questions we can walk through. What is God calling you to do? What are you avoiding? And what is God exposing? Because if we're paying attention, we're asking questions. If we're paying attention, we're making observations. If we're paying attention to what God is doing and what God is drawing us to, then we begin to see, we begin to get uncomfortable. Because it's not something we're used to doing. First to God, secondly to others. We can mirror this in the church, right? First, we have a responsibility to build a relationship or reception with God. Then we have a responsibility to build one another for paying attention. Are we paying attention to each other? Are we paying attention to what's going on in one another's lives? Or are we just simply letting it go? We could mirror paying attention with the same thing that God and the captain said to Jonah. Rise, pay attention, focus, look, see. If you're not going to pay attention to what God has been calling you to, who are you going to pay attention to? Sometimes it's to other people, and God uses that. Observe before you assert, listen before you assume, notice the needs of other people before they become your needs. And number two, this is the universal thing we say to people all the time. Serve. What I mean is move towards the needs of other people before they become your needs. Before they become the collective need. Before they become your trouble, which they should to begin with. If somebody's suffering, we're all suffering together. We should be at least. We should be involved in lives. If the church, think about this. If the church is going to survive, we need to be in each other's lives. What is it that God is trying to create? What is it that God is calling us to do? What is the vision of the Lord for this place? Because to some degree, we're in crisis. To some degree, we got a little panic, scramble facing this. What are we going to do? What do we got to do? Where are we going to go? What's going to happen? So we pay attention and we serve. See, the sailors learned in the boat what we forget in comfort. We're all in the same boat. What affects one of us eventually affects all of us. So here's your challenge for the week. And we can get more specific with this as we go along. Identify one need that does not directly affect you. Do something. One need. Someone could be your spouse, could be your neighbor, could be a church member here that you're close with, could be a family member in another state. Could be somebody from work. I don't know the situation, but identify a need. Sit there, think about it. What is being presented to me where I can act in such a way that glorifies God, that raises up Jesus? Are we capable of doing this? Are we capable of identifying one singular need? I'm not asking you to go out and baptize 20 people. I'm not asking you to go out and just start being bold and sharing your faith. I'm asking you to identify one need of someone else that isn't you. Someone else that isn't. That is something else that isn't your need. And do something. It could be making a call, could be sending a card, could be shooting a text, could be meeting for lunch, could be something, could be helping fix someone's lawn. But I would identify that need. Can I challenge you to do that? Identify a need and do something about it. Don't just let it sit, don't just let it walk away. Do something. Move towards the problem before it becomes your problem.